Hi, I'm David Fountain and I'm an ex-teacher. I'm very much not a financial advisor, so all I'm going to do is try and help you understand parts of the scheme that seem to be causing some confusion. And today I'm going to look at the Remediable Service Statement, the RSS, and the options that are contained within it. You are making some big financial decisions, so if you're in any doubt at all, you should seek properly qualified financial advice as to what options will work best for you. I'm not going to tell you which is the best, just show you ways in which you can find where the figures are and then maybe interpret them or lay them out in a spreadsheet that I hope will help you understand. So you've started the process for retirement, you've worked out how much you can get and decided that now is the time to move on to that next phase of your life. Whether that could be going on cruise after cruise or spending more time planting rows and rows of spuds in your allotment. But before you get to the pension, you are sent this rather large document and asked to send back your choices. There are a lot of numbers on it and it's easy to get confused. That's not the fault of the TPS or the Teachers Pension Scheme. It's just that the scheme is complicated, and even more so given the legal challenges that followed the age discrimination. What I've done, and I hope, is to create a spreadsheet that will let you play with these numbers and see the implications of taking each option, and then what impact choosing things like having an extra large lump sum or picking a figure and saying I need 24,000 a year to survive on my pension, what will that give me under both options? I'm afraid it is going to require some work from you to get to that point, because you've got to put your numbers into various parts of the spreadsheet. So let's look at the Remediable Service Statement, or RSS. Now it packs a lot in, but I hope I can show you how to extract the important points and then use them to help you make your choice. First things first though, one of the key points is to check your service history. If there are any errors, then the figures you're being given won't be correct, and you could end up making the wrong choice. So the first thing I suggest you do is check carefully this page. It has your service history, and any errors you find, you've got to go back to the employer at the time and have them correct them. Word of warning, this can be very difficult. The TPS, the administrators, won't do anything about those figures. They're not allowed to. They are simply the administrators. They work with the data they're given. And they will tell you it's simply a case of you've got to go back to the employer and get your employer to sort those out. Now, if all of those are okay, then we can be reasonably confident that the rest of the statement is going to be okay. Though, if you do have a better hypothetical calculation tucked away from a previous break, do check they have used it. I have heard cases where it's been missed. If you do have a hypothetical calculation, it is shown on the final salary page and it is handily labelled as such. In this case, there was no hypothetical calculation used, and so if you thought there should have been, you might want to go back and check and see whether or not it was missed or whether it just gave you a worse pension and therefore they've ignored it. So now onto the figures, the pounds and pence. These are the headline figures and are great if you have no intention of taking that extra additional lump sum. That's an extra you can get by selling or giving up some of your pension. Now I have an opinion on the value of that, but as I'm not a qualified financial advisor, you really need to find one with whom you can discuss the wisdom or not of doing that. I do have a video called Selling the Golden Goose on YouTube. You can look to find my opinion, and the title may give you a clue as to what my opinion is of that. But it's down to personal preference, so you're going to have to make your mind up. Now, there are, to my mind, two key rows here. The annual salary and the lump sum. These two rows are the ones that, to start with, give us a good idea of where we should be looking at. In this case, you have the choice of 20,500 as a pension and a lump sum of 56,500, or a higher annual pension of just over 21,000 but a lower lump sum of 43,000. Now I've set up a spreadsheet to help you see those differences, and I'll put a link in the comments and description of this video. So it might be worth you going and finding this. Here it is. And this is where we can find those figures and start to put them in. The white cells, if I go back to that one, the white cells you can see in the top sections here, rows 4 and 5 over here and row 4 and 5 over here. These top rows, 4 and 5, are the ones we're going to find from the statement. So let's start off where we can get them from. The total annual pension figures, the ones in red here, are going to go into cells B5 and C5 respectively. And then the automatic lump sum figures, a little bit lower down, are going to go into row 6. That's simply just a case of copying them from the statement into the spreadsheet. Then we need to find the optional lump sum amounts. And for this we need to look at the more detailed individual pages on the statement. So here I've got the final salary scheme, normally on about page 4, and one page later the career average scheme that I've highlighted in blue. Then on these pages you want to find the maximum optional lump sum rows, which I've highlighted again here. And these are the ones after commutation. So you're looking down that table to find the one that says maximum optional lump sum. And it's these two rows that we're going to add to the spreadsheet next. And they go in that right hand part and put those two figures in as shown. So that is everything we need from the Remediable service statement. The spreadsheet has all the data it needs to work. So really not too much data has to be moved across. Now why do I think this is a good idea? That's all of the top white cells filled in. So now what does the spreadsheet show you? Well, this pinkish section, all right, this pinkish section, I'm going to highlight that and just moving on that a bit more, gives us the basic figures. This top part is pretty much what you've copied from the service statement. So we could have got to that without really doing all this messing around. But that last column is showing you the difference. So it's showing you that option 1 is a lower annual pension, £640 lower, but a larger, £13,000 larger lump sum. The next part, I think, makes it clearer if you're looking to go for that larger lump sum. That is, if you're going for the maximum amount of lump sum, because you sell some of the pension. So in that first one, we're giving up over £4,000 of pension to get that extra large lump sum. And again, we have the comparisons there. So now if you wanted the maximum lump sum, you can see option 1 here is better under both cases because you're getting a larger pension, £300 larger, and you're still getting £2,000 more in that extra large lump sum. But now we come to the part I think is the most useful, because quite often I hear people saying, well, how much do I need to live on? And they come up with a figure and they say, well, I think I could survive on £20,000 a year. So this orange section at the bottom here is the part where you can put that in as the annual pension figure and then see what effect that has on the lump sums. You can't put in more than you've got, and you can't put in less than the one where you're converting the most to the lump sum. So you've got to, and it will warn you. It will come up with a warning and say you can't do that. So we've got those figures there, and those figures. You can go somewhere between those two rows. And if you try and put in a value that's not between those two, so if I suppose I put in 24,000, can't do it because my pension maximum was 20,000 anyway. So it tells me that I can't do that. So what I like about this part of the sheet is that if you've worked out the budget, you know what you want the pension to be, rather than you thinking I need so much of a lump sum. You can put it in here and then see which of the two options is going to give you the larger lump sum for that amount of pension. So once you've worked out how much of a lump sum you want, if any, now's the time to fill in the form and answer the questions. The first choice you're going to be given is whether or not you're going to go for option 1 or option 2. very simple. Once you've worked out the figures, you just tick the one you want. So you've used the spreadsheet, or you've looked at the numbers on the form, and you've decided if you're going to go for option 1 or option 2, and you simply tick which one you want. The next question asks if you want to take all of your pensions or just some of them. If you're taking the pension early, then you don't have a choice, and you must take all of the pensions at the same time. So you must tick this top one. If you're over the normal pension age, however, you can choose to take just the scheme that you've met the pension age. So you could, if you are 60, 61, 62, and you're in that 80th final salary scheme that has a normal pension age of 60, you can just take that one and leave the career average until later. Most people will have service in one of the final salary schemes and in the career average scheme. So quite often you will find that somebody might want to take both of those. Not quite certain why that top one is there. You know, all the pension benefits you're entitled to kind of means that you would have to tick the ones underneath anyway. But not everybody has got all three of those. In fact, most people have only got two. So once you've made this choice, you then get asked about each scheme individually. And that's because you are allowed to convert part of the pension. And because each scheme is slightly different, you've got to do that separately. You've got to do it once for each scheme. So now we look to the next page. And on this page, we get essentially 3 sections that are identical. But at the top, let's start off by just reading that warning. And one of the key things in bold here is that once you've sent this document in, once the benefits have started being paid, you can't go back and change your mind. So it's important that you understand and you've worked out what numbers you want, how much pension, how much lump sum you want. Because at this point, once you fill this in and send it back, you've got very little chance before it's paid and no chance after it's paid of changing your mind. So we now get each individual scheme. The questions themselves aren't too difficult. The first box, tick here if you do not have 80th final salary or you do not wish to convert pension for additional lump sum. Pretty straightforward. Got to read the whole line. It probably would be easier if you had 2 of them there. You do not have, you do not wish to convert. I would say probably having 2 boxes separate there would make it easier. But as you're always asking, or not, as you're always telling the children when they're reading a question for an exam or a test, read the whole question. So a lot of people will go, tick here if you do not have. Well, I do have. So they would ignore that question. They think, well, I do have. I've finished with that. But no, that last part says, or you do not wish to convert. So if you're going for the maximum pension and just the automatic lump sum, you would tick the top one. However, if you decided you want to give up some of the pension, if you do want a larger lump sum, then you've then got these 2 boxes underneath. Now, if you want the maximum, you want the biggest lump sum and therefore give up the most annual pension, you can just tick this second box and leave it to the pension scheme to work it out. I would say be careful. Do you know how much you're going to be left with in your annual pension if you give them this choice? If you say to them, take as much as you like. There are limits, but if you don't know that limits, are you going to be happy that you're getting as big a lump sum? Have you got plans for that? Do you need the biggest amount? And are you aware that by getting the biggest amount, you're giving up the most annual pension? So the annual pension gets a lot lower if you're giving up the maximum. In this scheme, the 80th final salary scheme, you can give up about 20% of the annual pension. So I personally, not advice of course, I personally would say work out the numbers and then decide how much you want to give up. So if you're wanting to give up £2,000 and that's within the limits of what you're allowed, write that in that box. And so you leave the first 2 boxes empty because it says or between them and say, here I want to give up £2,000. Now you don't write this part on, but essentially that would mean you're getting an extra £24,000 as the additional lump sum. Now, as long as I've got enough to give up 2,000, as long as 2,000 is less than that 20% of my pension, that's going to be fine. What about the next part? The second section is pretty much identical to that last one. but most of you will probably only have one of these top two sections. The 60th scheme came in 2007, so if you started after 2007, you will probably be in this scheme rather than the first one. So on the first one, you will have ticked the first box saying I don't have any of that pension. In this one, it's exactly the same. You tick the top box if you don't have it, or if you don't want to do any conversion. You tick the second box if you want to give up the maximum. Be careful. In this scheme, you're not giving up 20%, you're not giving up 25%. Remember, quite often I hear this thing about you can have 25% of the pension as your lump sum. Yes, you can. But that's of the value, and our scheme works differently. You can actually give up 35%, or just over 35, just under 36. If you tick that box, your pension is going to drop down to 65% of what it was if you took it all as a pension. That's a big drop. So if you tick that box, just be aware, have worked out the numbers, see what that actually means you're going to get. Or you can do the same as before. You can put in an amount that you want to convert, and again, that gives you that additional lump sum. That doesn't appear, but giving you an idea of what actually happens. The last one, the last section is identical. Whoops, that's still the second section. The last section is the career average, exactly the same. If you've taught since 2022, you're going to have career average scheme. So if you don't have it, tick the top box. If you don't want to convert any of it, tick the top box. If you want to let them take 35% and work out what that is, tick this box. Or again, you can put in the figures here to say how much you want to give up. Many of you won't be able to give up that much because the career average scheme at the moment, if you've only been paid for 2 years, you've probably only got £1,000, £2,000, £3,000 in there anyway. So the most you're going to give up, 35% of that, probably isn't going to allow you to give up 2,000. So just do check, as I've said repeatedly, check you've got the right numbers in here. You can only give up 35%. So if you put in a bigger figure, they'll come back to you and it will delay the process. They'll either come back to you or they will reduce it to the maximum, and then you may have wanted to have taken more out of the other part of your pension as well to get to the figure you needed. So just check carefully that you are within the limits. So just looking at the same thing, you've got those same three boxes. So I'll just use this one as an example. You're only going to tick or fill out one of these three boxes. You don't fill out two of them, you just do one. So long as, and you've got to do it for all of them. Even if you've got no pension, you've got to tick that top box to say I haven't got any. You've got to put an answer into one of each of those three. That's the end of the main pension choices. I'm afraid we're not finished quite yet. We now come to any extra pensions that you have purchased. At the top, we look at any additional pension that you may have purchased. You cannot have done this accidentally. If you don't know what this means, you're probably going to tick that top box to say you do not have any additional pension. Now, the wording here I think is poor. Do finish reading that whole of the top line, because you also, again, have to tick that top box if you have some but don't want to convert any. And it's quite strange. This is where the wording I think goes really long, because when you read that second box, you're kind of thinking, well, do I tick that one as well? You know, if I've got some and I don't want to convert it, I'm going to tick the top box. But if I've got some, this second box seems to be saying tick me as well. You know, I've got some. Until you read the next line, and this is where it gets a little bit ambiguous. It's very poor structure, very poor wording. Logic suggests that you could tick both of those top two. The wording under the second one suggests that the second one is about leading you into giving up some and saying how much you want to swap. So if you have ticked yes, please indicate. Don't like the question, but we deal with what we've got. So same process applies. You can decide that you want to give up some or not give up some. If you're going to give up some, you would say, I wish to give up either the maximum, or you put in a figure how much of that. And again, it's that same principle, you know, up to 35%. Oh, if it's additional pension in the final salary scheme, I think it's still 20%. Not absolutely certain. It might be 35%. We'll have to check that one out. Now, there is one more thing. Yeah, that bit there. That sentence really doesn't jive with what you're going to put in. One more thing to consider in regard to additional pension. If you would have bought additional pension between 2015 and 2022, but you were barred from doing so because you were moved to the career average scheme at that time, which was illegal, you are allowed to make an application to purchase some additional pension now. However, you've got to make that application before you send back this RSS choice, and you only have 6 months from getting the RSS choice or the remedial service statement. Everybody should be given this by April 2025. If you've not done it within 6 months of getting it, and you don't do it before you send back your answers, then you can't buy it. If this is something you're interested in, would have done at the time, and you want to do now, take a look for this video on YouTube, where I go over what that means. Now we come to the last decision, and this is to do with past added years. Again, this is something, for most of you, this page can be ignored. You can't have done it accidentally. It's a very deliberate decision. You'll have been paying extra over your career to do it, because prior to 2007 it was possible to buy years that would be added to the final salary scheme. If you did that and you decided to pay over a number of years, you may not have finished paying for it. As such, you are now being given the choice to either accept how much you've already paid for. So if you said pay for it over 5 years and you've only done 4 years, you're going to get 80% of what you paid for. Or you can decide to say, I want to pay the remainder, and they'll roll it all up and decide how much you would have paid over the rest of the term, how long you're going to pay, and send you a bill. And that you can pay that, and you'll then get the benefit of those extra years. Tick the box for which of those you decide to do. Probably going to be worth doing the math to decide if it's worth it, but they will tell you how much you've got to pay before it goes on any further. Oh, yeah, that's just a little close-up of what those questions were. Then we come to the last page. Phew. This page is your declaration. Do read all of the bullet points. You are agreeing to all of the conditions within them. And you may want to seek properly qualified financial advice. You'll notice that's written in there. That's not me. I'm just an ex-teacher. I'm not an advisor. I have no financial qualifications. Hopefully you'll understand that I'm just leading you through how to make comparisons. So in summary, for a start, none of what I've said can be considered to be advice, other than to read the questions carefully and fully. And if you don't understand them, get advice. By all means, use my spreadsheet to help you compare the options to decide what is the best one for you. And before you start filling out the form, decide if you want a larger lump sum and a smaller pension, therefore, or whatever you want. Get it all laid out and worked out before you start the form, because it's much easier if you know what you're aiming for. You've got to complete each section of the form. The only one you don't have to complete is that past added years, because there is no box to tick to say I don't have any. You would just leave that one blank. And if you want to buy retrospective additional pension, then you must apply before returning this form. Hopefully that's given you a helping hand in understanding how to go through the remedial service statement. A link to the spreadsheet will be in the comments, and please ask any questions if you have any. Thank you.